The rain didn't fall. It attacked. It came down in heavy sideways sheets, turning the cracked concrete of the Blue Ridge Parkway gas station into a slick, shimmering mirror of distorted neon. I stood motionless beneath the flickering awning, every inch of me soaked through, mascara bleeding down my cheeks like war paint gone wrong. The only sound louder than the relentless pounding of the storm was the fading hum of Jake's BMW engine, its taillights swallowed by the wet gray blur. He didn't look back. No pause, no hesitation, just those last 4 cold words before he shut the door. "I need space, Emily. I'm done." And then he drove off, 40 miles from home. No car, no coat, a broken umbrella, a dying phone, and a marriage that had evaporated in the middle of a storm. I didn't even notice I was shivering until I stepped inside the tiny, blinking convenience store. The sudden blast of fluorescent light felt like a slap, harsh, unforgiving. A teenage clerk behind the counter blinked at me, clearly trying to decide if I was a runaway bride or a soaked lunatic. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he asked. "Fine," I said, though my voice cracked on the word. I wasn't fine. I was humiliated, abandoned, trembling in a dress that clung to my skin like a wet paper towel. My phone buzzed in my hand, a ghost of a connection, with 17 missed calls from the office, 3 from my brother Matt, and not a single word from Jake. My husband of 8 years had just driven off and left me, as if I were luggage forgotten on the curb. What really broke me wasn't the storm, or even the abandonment. It was how casual he'd been. At the overpriced steakhouse, Jake had finished his meal, paid the bill, wiped his mouth with a linen napkin, and said it like he was canceling a gym membership. "This isn't working anymore. You'll figure your way home." I had laughed. Actually laughed. I thought he was joking, being dramatic, but when I followed him out, trying to keep up in my heels, he just pointed across the street. "There's a gas station. You've got your phone." As if a phone could fix everything. As if I had anyone left to call. The truth was, I'd let him cut me off from everyone over the years. Slowly, my world had shrunk to just him, his friends, his family, his needs. And now, standing in a gas station at 9:42 p.m. in the middle of nowhere, I realized I had no one who could get to me in time. Matt was 3 hours away. My parents were on a cruise. I was alone. I opened my banking app, thinking I could at least call a rideshare, when the number on the screen made my breath catch. $47.30 tellers. This morning our joint account had over $3,000. Now it was a wasteland. I scrolled. A withdrawal for $2,000, time-stamped at 4:47 p.m., right when Jake had stepped out for a quick call. He hadn't just left me. He'd cleaned me out. The bell above the convenience store chimed, a small, hollow sound. I barely glanced up, but then something in the air shifted. The silence changed. The teenage clerk stopped chewing his gum, and when I finally turned, I saw a man standing near the door, water dripping from the edges of his black windbreaker. His eyes scanned the store with a quiet calculation. Not panicked, not annoyed, just alert. It took me a second to recognize him. David Grant. I'd seen him once or twice at Jake's company parties, always standing off to the side, not drinking, just watching. His eyes landed on me, and his expression shifted from polite detachment to immediate concern. He crossed the room in 3 slow, steady steps. "Mrs. Carter." His voice was deep but calm. "Are you all right?" For a moment I didn't know how to answer. The question was so simple, yet no one else had bothered to ask it. Not Jake, not the waiter at dinner, not even myself. I hated how small I felt in that moment, how much effort it took just to stay upright. "He left you here," David stated, his voice flat. I nodded, my lips too stiff to speak. "Where do you need to go?" he asked. And are you in any danger? That stopped me cold. No, I said too fast. Then again, slower. No, Jake's not violent, just cruel. David nodded once, like that confirmed what he already suspected. Then he surprised me. I can give you a ride home. No strings. You shouldn't be alone right now. Something in my chest cracked open, not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. No savior complex, just calm, competent concern. My entire marriage had trained me not to accept help without asking Jake first, but Jake wasn't here. Jake had driven away and left me like trash on the sidewalk. Thank you, I whispered. Yes, I'd appreciate that. He nodded again. I'll grab some coffee. Take your time. Meet me outside when you're ready. As he turned away, I caught sight of my reflection in the security mirror above the chips aisle. What I saw wasn't flattering. Wet, disheveled, defeated. But it was honest. This was what being discarded looked like. But maybe, just maybe, it was also what being free looked like too. I stepped back out into the rain. This time, I wasn't alone. David's truck was parked beneath the single flickering light in the lot. A black Ford F-150 that looked like it belonged to someone who expected bad things to happen and planned accordingly. The interior smelled faintly of leather and coffee, and it was immaculately clean. Not a single fingerprint on the dashboard. He reached over and opened the passenger door for me without a word, then waited until I was settled and buckled in before starting the engine. He just drove. At first, the silence between us was thick with everything I couldn't say. Every minute felt like I was being peeled away from the version of me that had believed Jake would come back, that he'd had a bad moment, that this was some kind of mistake. But it wasn't. He'd planned it. The financial wipeout, the timing, the storm, all of it. After 10 minutes, David spoke. His voice was low and even. I hope you don't mind me asking, but how long has this been going on? The way your husband treats you. My throat tightened. I wanted to answer, to say he doesn't always treat me this way, or he's stressed from work, but the words wouldn't come because none of them were true. I've done security work for a long time, he continued, eyes on the road. You get good at spotting patterns, control, isolation, gaslighting. Jake's been laying the groundwork for this for a while. You probably know that. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The truth was already humming in the quiet space between us. At the company holiday party last year, he added, I saw him redirect every conversation you tried to have. Anytime someone showed interest in you, even just small talk, he'd insert himself, shift the focus, keep you orbiting him. I turned to look at him, stunned. I didn't notice, I said softly. You weren't meant to, he replied. He also told 3 people that you were too trusting and needed him to keep an eye on things. Made it sound like a joke, but it wasn't. He was undermining you. I closed my eyes. I remembered those moments, the way people laughed awkwardly, and I had just brushed it off. He wasn't being charming. He was creating a cage. You were watching me, I said, more surprised than accusing. I pay attention, he said simply, especially when something doesn't feel right. He didn't elaborate, didn't need to, and somehow that made me trust him more than I had trusted anyone in years. You reminded me of my sister, he said quietly, before she left her husband. The word left hit differently than I expected. Not escaped, not survived, just left. As if it were a decision she'd made, not something she'd had to be rescued from. He ever hit you? David asked, not accusing, just verifying. No, I answered honestly, never. That doesn't mean it wasn't abuse, he said. I turned toward the window, blinking fast. He wasn't trying to make me cry, But that was what made it worse. He was just telling the truth, and I wasn't used to the truth feeling like a kindness. "Emily," he said finally, "whatever happens next, you need to think about protecting yourself, financially, legally, because men who abandon their wives in storms usually have a lot more planned than just walking away." That last line echoed in my chest long after he said it, because he was right. Jake hadn't just left me, he was erasing me, but I wasn't going to let him. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of clarity that only follows a storm. The sunlight filtered through the blinds in stripes, casting golden bars across the hardwood floors. It should have been a peaceful scene, but my mind was already racing the moment I opened my eyes. I was still in the guest bedroom. I hadn't gone near the master suite. Couldn't stand the thought of sleeping in the same sheets he had abandoned me from. I wasn't the same person who stood in that gas station the night before. Something sharp and cold and clean had sliced through the fog I'd lived in for years, and I knew exactly who I needed to call. Rachel Evans picked up on the second ring. "Emily, wow, it's been forever." "Rachel, I need a lawyer," I said, not wasting time. "And I need one fast." There was a pause, then her tone changed instantly. Cool, focused, razor sharp. "Are you in danger?" "No," I said. "But my husband left me 40 miles from home in the middle of a storm. He drained our accounts. I have evidence he's been planning this for months, and I have no idea what else he's taken." "Don't leave your house," she said. "I'm coming to you." She arrived an hour later, still in yoga pants and a hoodie, hair in a messy bun, but with the expression of someone who had taken down bigger men than Jake Carter before breakfast. "Show me everything," she said without preamble. I walked her through it all: the empty closet, the missing duffel bag, the jewelry box with my grandmother's ring gone, the email draft I found in the trash folder on his computer, clinical and cold, outlining how the separation would be mutually beneficial for personal growth. And most importantly, the bank transactions. Rachel's brows lifted as she scrolled through my phone. "He withdrew $2,000 the same afternoon he left you stranded. Did he mention anything about splitting accounts?" "No. I didn't even know he was thinking about leaving." She sat back, arms crossed. "Then he's in trouble. In California. And yes, we'll confirm this applies in North Carolina too. Marriage is a legal partnership. You can't just start funneling money away, hiding assets, and planning an escape while pretending to still work on the relationship. That's called dissipation of marital assets, and judges do not like it." She flipped through her tablet, pulling up legal codes, explaining terms like community property and forensic discovery. It was like watching someone assemble a weapon out of legal precedent and case law. "I feel like I've been sleepwalking for years," I admitted. Rachel gave me a look. "You weren't sleepwalking. You were surviving someone else's reality. And now you're about to take yours back." She paused, looking around the house. "Is this place in both your names?" "Yes." "Good. Don't move out. If he tries to return, we'll file for exclusive use. But you stay. This is leverage. We freeze the assets. We secure everything you can. You make copies of every document in this house, and I'll start building a timeline." "He told me last week that this trip was to fix things," I said. "He booked the hotel, planned everything." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "Then he wasn't just walking away. He lured you out of town so he could finish setting the trap." That truth landed like a punch. He hadn't just ended a marriage. He'd orchestrated a disappearance. Mine. But I wasn't gone yet, and now I had someone who knew how to fight. Monday morning arrived like a spotlight, harsh and impossible to ignore. I stood outside the Buncombe County Courthouse, spine straight, heels planted, flanked by Rachel on one side and Matt on the other. My brother wore a black jacket and a jaw locked so tight it looked like stone. Rachel had on a navy pantsuit and the kind of no-nonsense heels that said she wasn't here to negotiate. She was here to win. I spotted Jake before he saw me. He sat beside his attorney, a tall man with silver hair and a kind of polished arrogance that screamed, "Retainer fee." Jake wore the same Rolex he swore he'd pawned last year. His face was composed, clean-shaven, calculated. And when he saw me, he smiled like none of this was real, like we were two adults resolving a misunderstanding, not adversaries in a legal war he had started the night he left me in the rain. "Don't look at him," Rachel whispered as we took our seats. "Every glance is an invitation. You're not here to talk. You're here to win." The judge entered. Honorable Margaret Chin, stern, concise, with a reputation for cutting through theatrics like a scalpel. I liked her instantly. The hearing began. Rachel stood first, presenting our emergency petition to freeze all marital assets, grant me exclusive use of the home, and secure immediate temporary support. She walked the court through the timeline. Jake booking the reconciliation trip. Jake draining $2,000 from the joint account hours before dinner. Jake abandoning me 40 miles from home with no transportation, no cash, and no notice. Then she submitted the email draft. Even Jake's lawyer shifted in his seat. When it was their turn, Jake's attorney attempted to soften the blow. "Your Honor, this was a mutual decision. My client acted out of emotional distress. There was no financial intent to defraud. Judge Chin didn't blink, and yet he left her without funds, without warning, and without means of transportation in inclement weather. Do I have that right, Counselor?" "Yes, ma'am," Jake's lawyer finally conceded. Then Jake stood up. "Your Honor, Emily and I have been struggling for months. We agreed that space might help. I didn't intend for her to feel abandoned. I miscalculated." "Miscalculated?" the judge repeated, her voice flat. "Yes, ma'am." "And the funds?" she asked. Jake hesitated just a second too long. "They were business-related." Rachel stood. "We request proof of that, Your Honor. Receipts, transfers, any documentation that shows that withdrawal was related to company use and not personal liquidation." "You'll get it," Judge Chin said, already scribbling. Then she looked back at Jake. "Mr. Carter, abandoning one's spouse under the circumstances described and draining shared accounts does not paint you in a favorable light. I am granting the petition. All joint assets are frozen pending forensic review. Mrs. Carter will retain use of the marital residence and receive temporary spousal support in the amount of $4,000 per month." Jake's composure cracked for a brief second, just enough for me to see the flicker of rage behind his eyes. Good. He thought he was going to walk away with everything. The money, the house, the version of the story he'd been telling everyone. But today, for the first time, he was being held accountable. And I wasn't the woman who used to make excuses for him anymore. Jake called that same night. I let it ring 4 times before answering on speaker with Matt seated across the room, watching like a hawk. "Emily, what the hell do you think you're doing?" His voice was tight and rehearsed. "I'm exercising my rights," I said calmly. "You had to humiliate me in court in front of my attorney, my investors. Do you even realize the damage you've done?" "You mean the damage you did?" I replied. "By abandoning your wife in a rainstorm with no money and lying about our finances for years?" There was a pause. Then his voice softened, shifted like it always did when he needed to pull me back in. "Look, we both made mistakes. I'll admit I didn't handle things well, but dragging this through court isn't going to help either of us. You're angry. I get that. Let's meet somewhere. Talk things through like adults. Matt made a slicing motion across his throat. Don't answer that. I didn't. Instead, I said, all communication goes through Rachel now. If you have something to say, you can say it through her. Don't be stupid, he said, his voice hardening again. You think she actually cares about you? She wants your case to drag on. She gets paid more the longer this takes. You really think she's helping you? She's helping me more than you ever did. Emily, he said, that dangerous softness returning. This doesn't have to be ugly. It already is, I replied, and I didn't make it that way. You did. I placed the phone face down. My hands were steady. My voice had held. 3 weeks later, the truth arrived, not as a rumor or suspicion, but as a thick folder laid across my kitchen table by Rachel herself. Sit down, she said, her lips curled in a grim smile. It was the look of a lawyer who had just found the knife used to stab her client, complete with fingerprints and a signed confession. What you're about to read, she said, tapping the folder, is going to make your blood boil, but it's also going to put you in the strongest negotiating position I've seen in years. I sat. The top page was an executive summary from the forensic accountant she'd hired. One phrase jumped out immediately: undisclosed marital assets exceeding $12.4 million. He always said the business was barely staying afloat, I whispered. Rachel nodded. Turns out Carter Design and Build wasn't just doing okay. They secured a state contract 3 years ago, $140 million over 5 years, and that's just the surface. She flipped the pages, revealing property deeds, offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, and 2 shell companies registered under names I didn't recognize until I saw the initials, SB, Sophie Blake. He wasn't just hiding money. He was building a future without me. He had even drafted a full asset separation agreement under my name. Forged. He tried to forge my signature, I whispered. Tried to, Rachel confirmed. It wouldn't have held up in court, but if you hadn't contested the divorce, he would have slipped it through. He thought I'd roll over, I said. Because he trained you to, Rachel replied. That Monday, we walked into the downtown firm where Jake and his attorney were waiting, all cool air conditioning and cold arrogance. Jake stood when I entered. He looked thinner, paler, like the stress had started gnawing at the edges. Emily, he began, that soft voice back in play. I think we can resolve this amicably if we both... I raised my hand. Save it. Rachel placed our file on the table. This is our position. Full disclosure of all assets, a 50-50 division of everything acquired during the marriage, plus retroactive spousal support and full legal fees covered by Mr. Carter. Jake's attorney scoffed. That's outrageous, Rachel smiled. It's law. They offered a counter, $200,000 and the house. You're offering me $200,000, I said slowly, to walk away from a marriage where you hid over $12 million and left me in the rain like roadkill? Jake leaned forward. Most of that isn't liquid. Then you shouldn't have stolen it, Rachel said without a blink. We stood to leave. Emily, Jake said, his voice desperate. You don't have to do this. I turned, held his gaze. The person I used to be, I said. She would have listened. She would have negotiated. But she drowned in a gas station parking lot 3 weeks ago. And this version of me, she doesn't take crumbs. The final hearing was brief, clinical, and brutal. Judge Chin read the ruling with the precision of a surgeon. Jake Carter was found guilty of concealing marital assets, forging financial documents, and attempting to defraud his spouse. The court awarded me 60% of all declared and discovered assets, full ownership of the marital residence, and an additional $500,000 in punitive damages. Jake didn't say a word. He sat with his lawyer, face pale, hands clasped tightly in his lap. When the judge declared the ruling final, he didn't even flinch. He just stared straight ahead. But it was real, and it was over. 3 weeks later, the checks cleared. The house was mine, officially. His name stripped from the deed. The mortgage paid off. The first thing I did was repaint the front door. Forest green, the color of peace, the color of new beginnings. Then I called Matt. "I want to talk about the nonprofit," I said. He laughed. "I was wondering when you'd bring that up again." We sat on my back porch for hours that night, brainstorming. Not revenge, not bitterness, just a mission to create a fund for women leaving controlling or financially abusive relationships. A way out, legal help, housing, a voice. We called it Project Rainlight because that's when I was reborn, in the rain, left behind, and then picked up not by a man, but by the version of myself I didn't even know was waiting. David, now a friend, joined as head of security and logistics. Rachel offered free legal consultation. Matt set up the tech. We launched quietly but confidently, collecting stories of women escaping, surviving, reclaiming. 6 months later, Project Rainlight received its first state grant. We expanded into 3 counties, hired 4 more attorneys, and opened our first transitional housing unit. On the wall inside that small white building is a framed copy of my original court order. Not to brag, but to remind every woman who walks through that door, you don't need to be fearless. You just need to be.